So from works of UN, now we are moving on to the support sustainable development and climate action. The United Nations launched its Sustainable Development Agenda in 2051, reflecting the growing understanding by member states that a development model that is sustainable for this and future generation offers the best path forward for reducing poverty and improving the lives of people everywhere. At the same time, climate change began making a profound impact on the consciousness of humanity. With the polar ice caps melting, global sea level rising, and cataclysmic weather events increasing in ferocity, no country in the world is safe from the effects of climate change. Well, all of this effort which has come is because we are witnessing a phenomena which usually we know it as climate change. So this is a crisis which is borderless, which has the potential to affect each and every country, each and every community perhaps in some way or the other. The degrees might differ, but the risk what it poses, the danger it poses is not zero for anyone, right? This is where this collective effort is needed, right? Well, some of the events which may happen like a first, which may actually start like a registering its impact at the first level, those are like a given over here, and it is now a common sight what we are witnessing from around like a places of like a such like examples, right? Polar ice melting, global sea levels rising, cataclysmic weather events increasing, like there is a fluctuations in the like a like how it used to be a kind of like a regular like a cycle. Now there are like a troughs and lows being observed in that like a regular cycle of weather patterns, right? This is bringing a lot of danger to the human society. Building a more sustainable global economy will help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. It is therefore critically important that the international community meet the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and also the targets for reducing emissions set in the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015. Sustainable development and climate action are linked, and both are vital to the present and future well-being of humanity. This is where it becomes integral. These are interlinked. These are like interdependent. Okay, we are interdependent. Like such like a phenomena. That's where we cannot actually escape like this. So let's see briefly the MGDs, the Sustainable Development Agenda MGDs. Close to 40% of the population of the developing world was living in extreme poverty only 2 decades ago. Since then, the world has halved extreme poverty. Of course, not everybody has been like able to like come above like that level, but a significant number of people are now above that line, which is definitely a positive like a point. With the UN's Millennium Development Goals MDGs greatly contributing to this progress. Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 Agenda. The 2030 Agenda, recognizing the success of the MDGs and the need to complete the job of eradicating poverty, the UN adopted the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which includes ending poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and partnerships for the goals. The Paris Agreement. While these goals were being formulated and approved, the United Nations supported the climate change negotiations, which led to the Paris Agreement on climate change in 2015. The central aim of this Paris Agreement is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels, or even below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So you can see it mentions pre-industrial levels. Because if you study, there is a direct and undeniable suggestion that industrialization has contributed a lot to this whole climate change crisis. So what were the societies, like a standards, what were the, like a situation of like, like a gases, and their percentage in the atmosphere, and how the health of the soil or air and the water was typically, before, like this, came into the being. Okay, keeping those actually ratings as the base case and then further improving. Okay, because it's not that humanity has come on this planet for the first time. We have survived this planet for the unknown years, right? Since the time of our first like existence, which came into being, until like this industrialization began. During all of those years, maybe running in thousands and like perhaps lakhs and millions, okay, we have survived along with the other species of flora and fauna on this planet. Okay, but why suddenly this crisis? Okay, so the direct culprit is right here. Okay, so there is a major like improvement, major like a change needed into this. Okay, and that's why we are referring pre-industrial levels. So the central aim of the Paris Agreement, let me underline it for you, is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, or even below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this was the premise of Paris Agreement. In order to reach these goals, financing, new technology and an enhanced capacity building framework will be put in place. The agreement also provides for enhanced transparency of action and support through a transparency framework. So, of course, we need these goals and of course the funding, new technology, because this industrialization actually brought some technologies, and human communities, human societies started producing like a certain goods and like a things. And in the later years and later decades, it was observed like there are a lot of flaws, a lot of lacunae and like issues in those technologies. So we need to rectify those technologies. For rectifying those technologies and coming up with the new technologies, it further requires investments in R&D, and for that we need funding. Enhanced capacity building framework. Capacity building at each and every level. Capacity building for these countries, these 193 member countries, not all of them are having the same GDP or the same capacity, right? So how these things can be shared with all of them, how they can implement within their countries, to different states, perhaps not all of the states are doing at the same, like a level, how they can come together and play together, do this, adopt, these action plans together. In those states also, perhaps not every district may be performing, at the same level, how again they be brought together at the same level, so this as a like a collective and cohesive, like a like an effort. These are the two key summits, you may call them as like a landmark summits. We saw like them previously in the previous slides, they are mentioned. SDG like a summit 2019 and climate action summit 2019. They were the landmark like a summits which actually brought a lot of change. Here I have listed the key entities working to support sustainable development and climate action. I'll read one by one. Maybe you can keep a screenshot for your reference. The first, UN High Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. Second, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Generally we know it as IPCC. UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. The UN Environment Programme, UNEP. United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. You may have seen in the rural India those hand pumps long back, a few decades back, at the countrywide, like effort, those hand pumps were installed under, like this program to provide safe and portable, wholesome water to the communities where the water levels have typically gone, down. United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UN Regional Economic Commissions, Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Economic Commission for Africa, United Economic Commission for Europe, Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific, the ESCAP Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster and Climate Preparedness, the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, UN Office for Partnerships, World Meteorological Organization, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, UN Global Compact, United Nations Population Fund, UN Habitat, World Food Programme, Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO, International Fund for Agricultural Development, International Labour Organization, International Maritime Organization, International Telecommunication Union, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNICEF, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, World Tourism Organization, Universal Postal Union, World Health Organization, World Intellectual Property Organization, United Nations Inter-Regional Crime and Justice Research Institute, UN Office on Drugs and Crime. So these are the key entities which are working to support SDGs and climate action. Now we are entering into the third chapter, scenario of current model of growth and development. This slide suggests a timeline of system dynamics and sustainable development, how it has grown over the years. So beginning 1972, you can see over here this Stockholm Conference, and then 1987 we saw this Brundtland Report, then Rio Earth Summit in 1992, 2002 Johannesburg Conference, Rio Plus 20, 2012, 2015 SD Summit. Well, here it spoke about limits to growth. Here it spoke about manuals, ballot and groping in the dark economic, like a oracle. 1990s, here it spoke about development policy analysis, Said, Ford, T21, IFs, etc. In 2000s, we saw about consolidation, Sturm and Ford, Rockstorm. In 2010s, in this decade, we saw climate interactive climate change, playbook, ISDG, Earth 3, etc. So these are the some landmark like a timelines. The upper row shows the progression of conferences, summits and reports that have defined and given direction to the concept of sustainable development. The lower row shows key developments in the application of system dynamics to sustainable development. Through the decades of progress, system dynamics has influenced the concept of sustainable development, which in turn has influenced system dynamics research and applications. Here in this slide, you can see this I have sourced from like at this place, high level structure diagram of the ISDG model, how it works, with sectors broadly categorized into environmental, outermost ring, the green one, social, the second ring in red here, and economic, the central in this blue zone. The computer generated connectors are shown to demonstrate that the model sectors are extensively integrated. Because if you see these keywords which are given over here, none of these can stay or function or work in isolation. They are definitely interconnected and they are working in sync. In design, we do one exercise, we call it system design or system mapping. This is exactly what entails to this slide. Nothing stands in isolation, nothing functions in isolation. Things are interrelated, things are interconnected, things are interdependent also. Okay, one has the potential to affect the second entity or the third entity, even when they are directly connected, of course, and even when they are not directly connected in that situation also. So you may see from the environment perspective, at the top we see the land, biodiversity, emissions and waste, manual material consumption, primary energy supply, electricity generation, energy consumption, water supply, water withdrawal and soil. In the economic zone, we see employment, vehicles, infrastructure, health, education, mortality, fertility, population, poverty, distributed income, etc. And then inside that, we see balance of payments. In the economic zone, these were at the social zone, households, government, governance, finance, investment, GDP, services, industry, agriculture, etc. These are definitely interconnected. If you see like a one zone over here, agriculture is directly connected to population, what produce we want, what quantity of produce we want, and what is the land available for that. Again, this is connected to the soil. The right soil conditions are very essential for a proper agricultural growth. Fertility of it, if it is not fertile, no use. And the industry, what is the demand of the industry and how industry is going to shape the agriculture. What are the services being offered, Of course, if I come to the, like a water supply, agriculture is directly dependent on the water. Okay. Of course, in many of the countries, including our own, a larger chunk of our agriculture still depends on the rains, right? That's why every year, Indian Meteorological, department actually keeps the check on the monsoons. What is the progress of those monsoons and at how soon they are going to arrive at your place, and the earth is going to quench its thirst, right? And each and every these entities, these nodes you see over here are interconnected in some way. So this actually research paper actually establishes this fact. That's why this is important for us to understand, like things are interconnected. And this is where you cannot work in isolation. If you belong to this governance, if you belong to directly the government agencies, if you belong to the householder, if you belong to any of these industries, or soil, or if you are a landowner, if you are working for the health, if you are an investment banker, if you are working in education, or if you are providing some sort of services, or if you own a vehicle, right? Any of these, if you see, you can relate yourself, then you can definitely see the kind of that interconnectedness which exists in that area. Further, to boost this relationship, I have borrowed this a slide from this source. Selected reinforcing feedback loops showing integration between ISDG sectors. So you can see how they directly touch each other. Like government revenues, it comes from the economic production. The year in which economic production, the GDP actually goes down, the government's revenues also go down. Okay, and now it is up to the government to work and work for inducing a growth in the economic production, right? So how it does also, you can see in its a reflectance, so that it comes back to its a kitty to its coffers, right? So government sector expenditure, again how much expenditure it has, and then expenditures on the health, infrastructure, and personnel, then transportation, access to electricity plays a huge role in the economic activities of any sort, even for the agriculture, right? It has, like a potential to touch average life expectancy also. You may be surprised because, it directly supports the health, like a services, and health services actually are going to benefit, like this expectancy, right? These economic, like production activities, they have certain, like impacts. Those impacts actually can be of variety of types. One of them, mentioned here is about, like air quality. It can affect, like a water quality. It can affect, like a soil quality. It can affect, like a noise. Like it can affect, like a view, and like a general, like a things. Okay, those entities, those things also have, like an impact on the average life expectancy. So on the one circle you can see it is working to improve the expectancy. On the other, like a loop, you can see over here it is having, some impact also, which is on the negative side, right? So we have to, like create, that balance and improve, of course, on this side, critically improve, like this side, so that the overall, resultant is not going in the negative, right? This leads to the productivity in multiple, like sectors, multiple dimensions, multiple, like a parameters, and those productivities, coming from all of those, aspects add to the economic production. So it's a kind of an interconnected, like a cycle. You can see over here, very easy to understand. Further, the another example, for like, that life expectancy thing and electricity, how and in what ways this has, like a carrying impact on the life expectancy. So right from here, electricity access, you can see the different nodes given on this slide. Electricity access for healthcare facilities, this is a positive, impact. Use of solid fuels for cooking, well, of course, this has negative impact, because a lot of, like a PM particulate matter and other gases which are going to come and, get emitted in the, like a habitable zone, which will, impact the human health. Use of ventilation appliances, of course, is going to bring, like a positive change. Access to information technology such as radio and TV programs, through which you can disseminate, like a knowledge and informations about, like such things to the faraway places, urban, rural, semi-urban areas, and every, like a community. Use of water pumps, water storage, water purification, refrigeration of food, etc. One negative thing we see over here, use of kerosene for lighting. Well, in the earlier, like a society, our PDS, public distribution, like a system used to, like a give this kerosene as a fuel in the rural areas. Okay, but we know in the with the scientific, like a studies, kerosene is one of the, like a very highly polluting, like a fuels. So how we can minimize it? Because the gain what you are getting out of, like a, that, like an entity, for example, kerosene. Okay, if you are able to light your home, so the gain and the pain, so it's a kind of, like a trade-off. So if the trade-off is, if the trade is going, like a heavy, more towards pain side, how you can reduce it, bring it down, and increase the gain side. Okay, so definitely we can replace, like a kerosene. You may have observed in the villages, rural areas, now, like a there is, like a discouragement to, like a this, for the usage, and electricity is being, like a given to the each and every, like a remote location, using, like either CFLs or LEDs in the recent years, getting rid of, like these kerosene based, like a things, altogether, right? So definitely this used to be a negative one, but with the incorporation of CFLs and LEDs and such, like electricity supply to the, like a last, like a household, a last family, there is a positive change we can bring. So this trade-off, always remember how this can be improved is the actually, like a target. Let's see some other points. Lighting around hospitals, of course, this is going to lead in the positive, like the effect. Availability of healthcare interventions such as X-rays, ultrasound to the, remote locations, because they need not actually travel to the cities to facilitate, like a such basic, facilities, of, like a health sector, right? Exposure to household air pollution, there are, like a some, like a pluses and some minuses also over here. Preservation of medicines and vaccines, this is, like a amazing, like a plus point, which helps, like a carrying and stock of like a such things, and like a huge number of population can be served. Contraceptives use, access to clean water, of course there are huge pluses. Food preservation, types of food being consumed. So the food contamination, if it goes for contamination, if something happens because of maybe some adulteration or maybe bad water quality or something, that's a big like a minus. But if you're working for like a supplements, nutrition, etc., at like a smaller level, like Anganwadi schemes and those things you may be aware of, they are being implemented for so many years now, for improving the health of of the lactating mothers and newborn like a kids, newborn like a children, so that they are also the equal like a placeholder like members of our society, and their health in the early like years is very critical for the rest of their lives. Okay, so they must not fall prey to those like diseases or lifelong like conditions because of the lack of proper nutrition. And then exposure to health risk related to collection of solid fuels, healthcare facilities opening hours, security around hospitals, it increases once there is like a light. Of course, some negative points you can see prevalent of diseases, so this actually leads to the like a negative output. This leads to negative output, things like that. There are some positive like output also. Collectively, this what we need to work is to stop or control the prevalence of diseases, and finally work to improve the life expectancy. There is another example from agriculture like a sector, this scheme of agriculture food supply chain. So you can see producers, the farmers, from where it goes to the processors, distributors, retailers, and end consumers like you and me. Then again there is like a loop back, which is like giving like a information about like a demand information, how much of like a demand for a particular like a commodity is there. This information comes from the end consumers like you and me. Then it goes to the aggregated like a demand information. Then it goes to the junction of supply and demand, what is the actual demand in a particular market. Then aggregated produce availability information from the producer levels. Then again the produce availability information from the entities which are producing, like farmers, right? So this works if you see in the sync. Okay, if there is a break, if this information somehow is not being able to be generated or collected, how do you know how many truckload of like a pulses and rice and wheat and like other stuff are needed in any given market? Okay, in the absence of such information, like these a crisis kind of situation comes up, and the there is a short supply of like a such commodity, and the prices actually rise, and some people, they actually become unable to procure those things. Okay, so we need to avoid like a such crisis kind of situations. So this actually cycle, which works actually both ways, needs to be strengthened and needs to be put up in the proper place. So you can see over here produce flow, finance flow, and information. So the information is coming from here at the bottom level, and of course the finances, the ones you purchase, the end consumer, okay, he or she pays for that goods and the services, and that payment actually keeps going of course to the last like entity of the like a producers. So this is how this cycle works. Now we will see like overall performances at like a climate change performance index. You can like search it on your own. You can see, you can check for the like a latest data. This I have data gathered for the year, the running year 2022, and this is what I found. You can see the overall results for like this year. So very low performance. You can see this red. North America, Russia, China, Australia, Japan, and some of these Gulf countries, and then low impacting ones coming from South America, South Africa, and some of these Eastern European countries and Vietnam, etc. And then medium ones, we see Mexico, these Southern European, Italy, etc. Right? And in our own backyard. High ones, we see India being one of the major economies, but having high performance index. So one of the like a praiseworthy situations. And Nordic countries here, and England, and a few more from here. And a very high, if there is any very high performing country, Chile is here in the high one. I am unable to spot any very high performing country in this. Okay, maybe you can check, but there is a problem in this like a presentation. Majority of the African countries and many of these like Asian countries, some here and on here and here, there is no data, no rating for these. And these countries also, like if you see like here Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, like these many countries, and most of these African countries, they contribute to the big population, huge consumption, and even resource supply. Like from here, a huge resources actually are distributed from across like the world. Okay, so this data is very essential to get the like a whole picture.